again.
Thank you for your time after all these
That's all right.
3 days of
It's
giving.
That's fine. I've just been refreshed by a beer.
But it was so important what you shared these days that I feel it's important to share it in your own words. So we just finished this 3 days seminar about peace in the heart.
Yes.
What does it mean, peace in the heart, for you?
Well, I do feel it is important, you know, and it's not something that kind of I thought was an interesting topic or something like that, you know. But I feel that it is an issue at the moment, a very real issue that there is no peace in the heart of people, you know. And with all that's going on in the world as well, I mean, there's no peace. And it is having an effect, you know, having an effect on us all collectively, you know. This sense of distress, if you like, you know, of having no peace. And it's affecting people's health, definitely. Mental health, emotional health, spiritual health of everybody. And not just the people who are interested in politics or involved in these kind of things, but young people, you know. And a lot of people don't quite understand why is it I'm feeling bad. Why am I feeling so stressed out? You know, life going well, I have a job, money to spend, you know, things like that, you know. But there's some sort of malaise, you know, some really, a lack of feeling well, you know, lack of feeling well. And this has been something that has struck me these past years, actually since COVID, you know, since COVID, which I feel was a kind of an unsettling event in the whole world. You know, it produced a kind of anxious, a kind of anxiety, you know, during that time, because, I mean, we lived a very weird time collectively in the whole world. You know, this confinement and the vaccines.
And at the same time, everyone.
Everyone, that's the thing, everyone. And the fear and anxiety that it caused, I don't think it's quite healed yet, that's why. And then after COVID, then you know, we've had these wars going on. And I know in our human history, we've always had wars here, there, and everywhere. But the point is that with the technology that we have, we're aware of it much more. So every time you open your laptop, your phone, or whatever, your television, it's right there. What's happening right now, you know? And this, on top of the unresolved anxiety that was produced collectively in the COVID years, I think it's just kind of destabilized populations, you know, so that we're living in this time of ongoing anxiety, which is the opposite of peace in the heart, you know. And it's an issue which has to be addressed. And it also comes from my training in Tai Chi and my training in Chinese medicine as well when I was much younger. That well-being, you know, when we talk of well-being, it's not just something vague, but it's quite concrete, you know. consists of certain aspects, like the flexibility of your body and your mind, the connectivity, whether you're connected, connected with yourself, connected with others, connected with the intangible, with the transcendent, and so on. And then there's the peace of the heart. So you can be very strong in the body, but if there's no peace in the heart, then you don't really have well-being. You're not really well, you know. And that, I think, goes with, for a lot of people at the moment, you know, there's a lot of emphasis in kind of being fit, and being, you know, strong and doing all these sports and exercises, all good. You know, I'm not against any of that. But there's something missing always, you know? There's something missing. And what's missing is more inner, spiritual, if you want, you know? But it's to do with the heart. It's to do with the actual heart, you know? Because the heart is a very extraordinary organism, you know? It's a motor, obviously, it pumps blood, you know? But it's also the register of emotions and the state of mind. You know? So the Chinese term Xin, heart, is actually heart-mind. So the two go together. And if you're not well in the heart-mind, you know, if there's no peace, then there really isn't any well-being. You can be strong as you like, you know, but if you're anxious and depressed and, you know, constantly worrying and so on, then you're not well. You're not well, you know.
When you hear the word peace, what comes in mind first is the opposite, which is war.
Yeah.
And then what other comes in mind is like a sense of tranquility. So what you do usually is you go work on a conflict, or you go work on anxiety, stress. But it's, as you said, it's not the opposite of that. It's something else.
Something else. It's something else.
What is it?
Well, there's a clue in Chinese language, and also in the term ping, which is, you know, one of the terms of peace. And it consists of a character with 5 strokes, you know. And the character, you see from the character, even if you don't know Chinese, you look at the character and you say, oh, balance. It has something to do with balance. A lot of Chinese characters, especially the old ones, have a kind of information because they're ideograms. And the ideogram for peace, ping, in Chinese, is this balance. So that gives a clue. Peace, as a concept, everybody kind of understands it intellectually, you know. But as an energy, as a vibration, has to do with balance. So the heart is balance. So if, for instance, you're hyperactive in your heart, that's not peaceful. And the complement of that is if you're low in your heart energy, that is not being well, not being at peace. So peace is about something harmonious and balanced, you know. And it's not something we can take for granted. You know. Peace comes and peace goes. I mean, this is what in this seminario we were really dealing with. You know, I asked everybody who was participating, I said, try and remember the last time, you know, that you felt peace in your heart. And everybody could remember. It's not that it's a special state, you know, but what everybody also affirmed was that it comes and it goes, you know, and you can't kind of hold it. You can maintain it if you know how, is the point. If you know how to regain the balance of the energy of the heart. And this is, in a way, what the spiritual life is about, you know. It's about having the tools, the means to maintain the peace in our heart, and, or to return to it, or to recover it when you've lost it. Because it would be totally unrealistic to think, oh, you know, because you do your yoga, your Tai Chi, or meditation, you're always going to be at this kind of like steady state of balance and peace in the heart. It doesn't work like that. You have to know how to recover it when it's lost. How do you lose it? All sorts of ways, you know. Grief, for instance. You know, when you've just lost somebody, you know, you're sad. You feel unstable, even. Fear. These are the two big energies, you know.
Taking a step backwards, because as you structured the whole seminar, you started from, as I perceive it, the manifestations of these two that you said, anger, stress, anxiety, all this. You started the first day with cleansing and rebalancing on all these emotions.
Yeah.
But this was the first layer,
Absolutely.
what comes first. So we are used to go deal with them. We are used to go deal with anger or with stress. So we ask a solution to that, and most often the solution is intellectual that they give us, and we're not used to touching these two roots that you mentioned, and not used to work with them through the body.
This is it. I think this is a very important point, and it doesn't contradict all the intellectual or psychological work. I think it all helps. But for me, what is often missing is working through the body and the vibration of our body, you know, of our actual physical being, which is where we feel anxiety and anger and all that kind of thing. So I think that it's very important to, again, in the context of finding peace in the heart or regaining peace in the heart, that you go to the body and find out what is not peaceful, what has disturbed it, you know, which may be patterns in your physical being, in your fascia, in your connective tissues, of anger, you know, for example.
In your movement patterns also.
Yeah, there are patterns, there are memories, there are wounds, there are traumas there. And without working psychologically, which is not my work anyway, but energetically, vibrationally, you know, to see what we can do to cleanse, to unravel, to undo those patterns that are fixed and that prevent us from living the peace of the heart, you know, because they'll always be there if you don't deal with your anger, with your impatience with yourself and the world and other people and so on. Then peace of the heart is just a concept which you understand and you might wish for, but you can't get there, bypassing what is not at peace. See, that's the point. And then going back to what I was saying, among all these things, all these negative factors, if you like, fear and grief are the ones that stand out. You know, they're the ones that we really have to face and have to confront and have to heal if possible. You know? And this applies to everybody. You know, grief, it doesn't have a culture. You know, it's universal. Fear doesn't have a culture.
How are they different, fear with grief?
How are they different? Well, first of all, they manifest in a different way, you know. Fear might even manifest as violence, you know, or it manifests as panic, terror, paranoia, see? Doubt, even doubt, you know, suspicion. All these are fears. Anxiety. We use this lovely term, anxiety. Actually, it just means fear. And so when I'm working with somebody who's afraid or fearful, I never start with the question why. I usually ask where, how do you feel it? Is it because you're ahead, like you're projecting something that hasn't happened, which produces fear, produces stress? Is it something that that you don't quite understand, but needs a cause from outside, like a fear of spiders? People have fears of spiders, for example, you know? Fear that is a construction, like you're afraid of death, right? Death makes a lot of people afraid, for example, but it's not happening yet, you know, but you're still afraid. Children are afraid of death, you know, and they become aware of that, and their parents, the grown-ups, don't quite know what to do with it. So fear it has a physical manifestation, definitely. You can be trembling, you can feel blocked, and so on. Grief is different in that it's so, well, both of them are ancient things in us. They're not things we have to learn. Grief, as I was saying in the seminario, you know, grief begins the moment we've left the safe, secure home of our mother's womb. You know, we're already grieving. We're already grieving. There's a kind of sadness. You know? And by the way, in both fear and grief, there is an element which is in terms of modern science, they call it epigenes or epigenetic, which in the Buddhists may call this karma. You know, karma, something that is part of the consciousness that you have brought into this incarnation. So there is a mysterious factor in both. But I'd say that grief, both of them are very deep in our biology. You know? But grief is more the sense of separation. You know? There's a sadness that comes from coming out of our mothers and being separated, having our cords cut, by the way, you know. So separation is very much about grief. And if you look at grief, when you lose somebody, you're separated from that person. That's what produces that emotion, you know. And they're no longer there. The person you shared a life with, years with, your bed with, you know, conversations with, they're not there. That separation brings us to the visceral, the basic separation that we've always carried with us. You know, the sense of, you know, being cut from a person. And fear may be there with the grief. You know. But the way to approach them both is slightly different. You know, it's slightly different because they're slightly different energies that you know, they have their own characteristics. You know. So with fear, the way I approach it, and I don't insist that it's the only way to do it, but it's through the mudras, you know, which you find in Buddhism. Most of in the statues you see of the Buddha, he's doing a mudra or another, and most of them are about transforming fear, because fear in the Buddhist vision of things is the root of all our craziness, of all our strategies, you know, to not be afraid of being afraid, to not be afraid of the other person, to not be afraid of nature, of shadows, of failure, of whatever it is. It's right there underneath everything, and it's behind all wars and violence. You know. So the way that I approach it, and I don't insist it's the only way, but it's the way that I would train to do, is through the mudras, which means to work directly, not again psychologically and analytically, but directly with the energy, to see if it's possible to transform. Because fear is an energy, like all other energies. If it's an energy and it's moving and it's vibrating, then we can work with it.
Even if we don't understand where it's coming from.
Absolutely.
And we don't need to analyze it and
we
understand.
We don't need to underline. Sometimes it helps.
Yes, it helps.
Of course it helps. If you're traumatized, and you just, let's say, when I first started my career, and I was working in America, a lot of people who came to the courses, they'd been in the war, they'd been soldiers, so there was a cause, they'd seen terrible things, they'd done terrible things, and so that fear had a link, but a lot of people don't have such a clear link, and they don't have even a clear understanding of why they're afraid. It's just this feeling of angst, of anxiety, of anjos, that they have. So what the mudras do is, it helps us, and I do it like a qigong. It's like a sort of mudra qigong. It helps you to bring it up so that you can work with it, you can breathe it, you can become familiar with it, you can name things which you'd rather push away. So this is the work on fear that I do. And does it guarantee that you kind of come out of there fearless? No, it doesn't. I don't think fear ever quite disappears, because it's part of our biology. But you're not the victim of fear anymore. This is the whole point. Your life is not kind of like led by what you're afraid of, So you avoid this, you avoid that, you make sure this doesn't happen, that doesn't happen, all this kind of thing. And I think it frees an incredible amount of energy, when you're at least making the effort to transform fear. You don't have to kind of like be totally free from it, and feel that, oh, you've got it licked, you've got it. You just have to work patiently with it and explore the capacity of transforming it, through the mudras, through the qigongs and things like that, through the body again, through the fascia, healing it in the fascia, healing it in the connective tissues. And in the process of healing, you will feel a transforming, that fear it's kind of a loosening, fear, instead of being, something even invisible that holds you there, holds the way you think, the way you feel, your body even, you start loosening that. Through your work, you see that, people who are afraid of their bodies, afraid to permit their bodies to do certain things, then you discover that, and then they live different, they live their lives differently. Grief, I think, you approach in a different way. For me, and this comes from my experience of working with it for a long time, because I've been working in the field of death and dying, and training people to accompany other people, as carers and as just ordinary householders, Over the years, I've kind of discovered that there are three basic approaches that have to be integrated if we're going to deal with grief. And some people may say, well, why do you want to deal with grief? Why don't you just move on? And the trouble is that if you take that attitude of just sort of like looking away from it, grief doesn't move on from you. That's the point. You may think you know, that you want to move on from grief. But grief actually stays with you the whole time. Grief is part of our humanity, of part of our being human, you know. It's a common ground. It doesn't matter what culture you belong to, you know. You have grief. Why do you have grief? Because you lose. You lose as a child. You lose your grandparents. You lose your first dog. You lose your first cat. You lose your first friend or whatever, you know. Sometimes your parents separate, so you lose your parents, you know, and so on. So it's very familiar to us. And then recently, in recent years, um, you know, I read up on as much as possible on all these kind of things. I came across this wonderful Japanese word, Japanese phrase called takotsubo. Takotsubo refers to something that scientists call these days the broken heart syndrome. The broken heart syndrome, which is not just a poetic term, but refers to what actually happens there, the muscles around the heart and so on. When we're shocked, when we're, you know, we've suddenly lost somebody, you know, there is this syndrome that actually happens to the heart. It's heartbroken, and it's not a poetic description at all. You know, it's describing what is happening. So this really interested me as well. You know, the broken-hearted syndrome, because if you extend that a bit, then practically all grief includes that broken-heartedness, at least for a while. But when the doctors who use this term use it, it means somebody who can't get out of it, you know, who's really shattered, whose life is shattered. And I've met that as well, because in my work with bereavement, with grief, with loss, I've met people who are stuck with that shock, particularly when the death was sudden, you know, there was no time to say goodbye, there was an accident or a suicide or murder or something like that, you know, that took somebody away. And the person is just left with that shock. And that often is accompanied by this broken-hearted syndrome. So anyway, this is in parentheses, because contemplating it and contemplating how to help people, you know, to heal and to integrate. I think that for me, it's not about moving on, but it's about integrating that, integrating the grief, not drowning in it and being totally destroyed by it, which some people are, but how do you integrate and transform the grief so that you can continue? Because grief sometimes, when it's transformed, you don't just continue, you continue kind of even stronger, you know, even stronger. And it's not a contradiction to say so. And the way that I approach it is three prongs. And the first one is sharing. You know, this is something that I think is being helped these days with these desk cafes and meetings of people, you know, strangers who share, you know, their grief, who share their loss with other people, and discover that they're part of a common ground, again, common experience. In the seminario, you know, this is what we were doing, is sharing, which is very difficult sometimes in grief. People don't want to share. Everything kind of closes up, you know, or they feel that if they share, they're going to be somehow losing the memory, you know, they don't want to share it out. And also because the energy of grief tends to close you, it tends to be contractual, you know, it's just like it contracts. And sharing for me is not just verbally expressing it, and, you know, in a group or anything, but it can be writing a song about it and singing about it. It can be painting something, it can be writing a poem, or writing a book, but something that expresses, that opens it out, that puts it out into the world. This is my pain, this is my wound, this is my grief, and you put it out. It's very important, instead of keeping it in. And then the second aspect of the healing of grief is to do with the breathing of the heart, of letting the heart breathe, breathing it out, into the air, instead of this choking. Because a lot of people who are in grief, who I've met, they describe this sense of, I'm totally blocked here, I feel choked, I'm choked. So I usually suggest very simple qigong of the heart, to open it out to the air, to allow it to breathe, and allow this whole area to breathe. So breathing practices, qigong of the heart, I think is important. So sharing the breathing exercises, if you like. And then the third part, which is also important, and particularly when the death has been too sudden, no time, is a ritual, which is not just the official rituals that you do in church and so on, or in public, but something more intimate, something more intimate that allows a kind of communication with the person you've just lost. And again, there's no fixed way of doing this. I usually help a family or a partner to construct this, depending on what's needed. If there's, for example, if there was not time to express their love and appreciation, that's what they do, and write it down, can burn this. There was a lady in the seminario just now. She wrote a long letter to her sister, who she just lost, and then she tore up the letter, and then put it into the mandala we made, which was our ritual. So there are many ways to ritualize it, but the ritual is part of the healing. The ritual, particularly when there are things left unsaid, and that you discover afterwards, oh, I felt this. And it may not all be positive, but there's a chance through the ritual for that to come through. So those are the three: sharing, the practices, the qigong, and the rituals. And then I think that grief has a chance to be integrated. And the integration of grief is something very transformative, A lady at the end came up and said, I'm a different person, And we didn't do anything dramatically impressive or anything, but it's just because she was allowed to turn to her grief, and look at it and feel it and cry and all this, but work on it directly, energetically, vibrationally, changed her. She felt changed from this.
What I see in common between fear and grief, that you didn't mention now, but you said it in the seminar. What I see in common is that in both cases we feel alone, disconnected, and what you put, we do the work, but we are not alone in the work. That's a very important aspect of everything that you did.
Terribly important, this.
The pause, what you said, I loved how you put it. Why we pause? To allow the universe
to come in and to heal, And this is terribly important. And the shared work, the collective work, going to the theme of peace in the heart. We can't actually do this by ourselves. We really can't, because almost by definition, the energy of peace is not an energy owned by anyone. You know, you can't own it. It works connected to others, you know, connected to others. And when we work together on our fears, our personal fears, we also discover that other people have the same, not the same, everybody's unique, but we go into the same ground, if you like, and with grief as well, you know. So this is very important, you know, and the support that we have in this work. And not just going individually to a therapist, let's say, but just in a very simple human setting, you know, of sharing it with each other and sharing the practices with each other. I think this is the important part, because what it leads us all to, is the sense that the whole world could benefit from this, you know, or the whole world could go through this. And imagine that. Imagine if the whole world is committed to healing their fear and their grief, because the whole world, if you ask people, what do you want from people, from other people, from life, from politics and all that, they say, oh, we want to live in peace. Everybody says that. But how are we going to do that, you know? How are we going to do that? And I find that this work that we've been doing is a kind of acknowledgement of something that transcends our divisions. You know, you can even be working alongside somebody you don't agree with politically, you know, but you do agree on one thing, which is that we both know grief, we both know fear, you know. So that it's a leveler, you see, it's a leveler. And imagine the values of our society, of our culture, of our politics even, based on something that wasn't like an identity, a common identity, like, oh, you're Greek, or, you know, you're Catholic, or you're the Buddhist, or whatever, or we are this, we are that, that kind of an identity, but founded on something real, not poetic, but totally real, that we live through all our lives, which is, what are we afraid of? What has saddened us? What have we lost? Who have we lost? You know, this cuts through all the divisions, you see. And when you communicate empathically, you know, with somebody, it's through this recognition. The person in front of me is not me, is herself, but she and I share this common ground of our humanity. You know, this vulnerability, this fragility, this sense that we have known fear, you know.
But only if we face it on our own, we can recognize it to the other.
Absolutely. When we start recognizing, and when we do allow ourselves to start recognizing grief and fear in others, it doesn't finish. It doesn't finish. It becomes the basis of the way you relate to everybody. People you don't know, you know, you can look at them and you have a different way of experiencing that, you know, which is not founded on identities. Oh, what do you do? Where are you from? What's your religion? What's your education? How much money do you make? And so on. All these things that divide us, you know. But you look and you don't even have to say it. Like, you have grieved. I have grieved. You know, you've been afraid. Maybe you are afraid now. I am afraid. And then that is a wonderful connection, because it's kind, because it leads to peace as well.
So peace in the heart, peace in the world.
Yeah.
How can we do that? How can we not react but respond?
Respond. Respond.
Explain this.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
your
this is the other theme we explored, because once you work with what blocks the peace in the heart, right, and you feel the peace not as a concept, but you actually feel the tender vibration, if you like, the pleasure of being at peace, which is accessible to everybody. This, when you confronted what is not at peace, the peace naturally arises. Naturally, you don't have to do incredible things. It naturally arises through singing together and just being together and sharing all this stuff together. And then, of course, comes the next question, that if you can connect with that, through the practices, through the work, obviously, it's nice to do that among people who are on the same wavelength, more or less, of sharing the same practices. But how do you do it in the world? This is the challenge. This is the next challenge. You're at peace in your heart when you're surrounded by good friends who you can trust because you're in a safe environment. But once you leave that environment, you go back to your family. Just the family alone is challenging enough, How do you maintain that? And how does it work? What relevance does peace in the heart when you're meeting somebody who maybe wants to have a conflict with you, or is jealous of you, or is angry with you about something? And there's no recipe, you see. There's no recipe, that there's no strategy. Because once you go to strategies, you lost the peace. Now you're in tension again. You're in a sort of tense state. And to me, it's something that I've learned through martial arts, that I'm grateful for. Because martial arts has revealed to me the difference between reaction and response. This is the point. Reaction comes from fear, the fear of being overwhelmed, dominated, losing, comes from this duality. And you can practice martial arts like that. There are loads of martial arts which actually encourage that fast reaction. But reaction actually is kind of poor, because the strongest will dominate in any reactive. And that's what wars are all about. You look at the wars now, the strongest dominate the weakest, the ones with the most arms, and so on and so forth. It's a kind of very poor way that we run the world, on that kind of power and strength and so on. But there's an option, and the option is response. Response. And this is what the Tai Chi has really taught me. That response, when you respond, you can respond with the heart, and you can remain peaceful in your heart. And response does not mean that you are the victim either, because you have the confidence. You have the confidence to remain centered, to remain quiet, but you have all these options, see? And this is the option of being receptive, being responsive, if you like to call it the yin, the yin element of the Tai Chi. It's very powerful, response. Response allows you as well to go beyond having to react to somebody's manifestation, let's say their insult or their violent behavior. Response means you've trained yourself to hear the fear behind that, and not be, if you like, infected by the fear, but you're holding your own center, and then you can respond from the peace of the heart. Again, it's not a strategy. It takes training.
And that's important.
It takes training.
To remind that it takes training.
Yeah, it's not an attitude you can just adopt. Why does it take training? Because we're talking about the body. We're talking about bringing the body into it. Not just being inspired or believing in something or being convinced or committed to something, but that your whole being, you're acting coherently. And this is what a lot of people who want to have peace and who want to act from peace, they don't manage it because they haven't integrated their body. They haven't trained their bodies to be peaceful. No, they're peaceful up here, peaceful here maybe too, but the body needs to be peaceful. The body needs to have that confidence, and that takes work. And that's what the martial arts should be all about, taking us beyond violence, beyond fear, to this confidence, so that you can live the peaceful heart in every interchange. I mean, we're not perfect. We're not saints, so it doesn't always happen like this. But there is this possibility. And again, I feel this is an incredible challenge to us all. Could it be part of the education of our children too? You see, to say you don't have to react to everything. You don't have to beat people up. You don't have to win. Much more pleasurable, because it feels pleasurable. The peace of the heart actually feels pleasurable. It's not pious. It's not like you feel like a saint or something. You actually feel I use the word a lot in this seminar, the tenderness of the heart. And you don't want to go too far from that. You want to stay there because it feels good. That's the whole point of the spiritual life, if you like. It's the whole point of the peace of the heart. It feels good. It feels good to live like that. Feeling tense and afraid and needing to dominate others all the time, that doesn't feel good. That does not feel good, And people who live like that end up taking pills or drugs or whatever to keep that going, to not that bad feeling, to kind of fuel by whatever they take. Whereas when you have peace of the heart, you don't need anything. It's a vibration. It's a energy that just flows through you.
Okay.
But it takes practice.
That's what I wanted to repeat. That we need to work on that.
We do.
On our own, together, and
on our own and together. Yes.
And the practice is what keeps us together.
Absolutely. Without the practice, it's just a nice belief, which helps, or being inspired, which also helps. But you can't truly live it. You can't truly live it. And if you can't truly live it, then the world stays as it is. But if there are enough people in the world just willing to take the risk of living truly from the peace of the heart, which means non-violently, which takes a lot of practice, then we have some hope, I think. And I think there are. I think there are many groups in the world now who are talking like we're talking, who are doing this kind of work too, making it real, making it coherent. And, I feel very much that this is the time when anybody who does body work, such as you, working on the body, liberating the body, healing the body like that, if you do not look away from the spiritual aspect, you have the tools, you have the means, to actually contribute to the healing of all this pain that's going on in the world, you know. But you have to be aware of what you're doing and to put it in that context, you know. A lot of people who do body work now, yeah, I mean, they're doing it sincerely and all that, but sometimes, you know, I get the feeling, you know, they're doing it to be well in their bodies, quite rightly, you know, some of them doing it to be beautiful, to be fit, whatever, all of which is good. But if you miss out the piece of the heart, which is the spiritual aspect of the body work, then you're missing out the treasure, the actual treasure of what you're doing.
I finish with your favorite mudra.
This is my favorite mudra. This one, the supreme trust.
Thank you.
Thank you again.